you ever wondered what makes something shareable? Online, the viral formula seems to be some combination of cat videos, pranks, and awkward dance moves. But what happens when you want to make something meaningful, shareable? Now that's a problem that I've been trying to work on for my entire career. It's something that I've been spending a lot of time and energy, and I think with the success of my latest viral project, I may have just found the answer. You ready to hear it? All right, here we go. If you want to create interesting, meaningful content online, all you need to do is think about it like dating. I'm serious. Look, first, you have to create content that's interesting enough so that you can pick someone up. From there, assuming you've done good, you need to be able to hold their attention with something intriguing, or else you're going to get zero engagement and people are just going to walk off. From there, assuming you got to invite them onto a first date, well then, you have to have enough in common with them, or else you're never going to go on a second. And if you've been dating for a while, well, you need to be able to surprise them from time to time. Otherwise, they're going to get bored and go look for someone more interesting. And just like with all relationships, when things break apart, well, it's never going to be fun because of diverging interests. And just like in real life, when it comes time to start over, well, you just do it over and over again. Except that online, you have to do it over and over again, monthly, weekly, sometimes even daily, just to stay ahead of the competition. Now, I just want to stand on this magical formula here for a few seconds before moving on to my first example. The pickup and the intrigue is actually where all of the shareability actually happens. This is what defines whether or not your content is going to be shareable. Basically, the test is, if you can take your project and pitch it to a stranger at a bar, and that would have a positive response, then the content has a good chance of being shareable. If not, well, probably not so much. The other part, though, the first date, the second date, and the surprise and all that, is really about the relationships that you're going to build with people. Now, I think as a content creator, you really want to have both. And so in my latest project, where I put a mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles, you would look at that and think that the headline might actually be the photo itself, especially considering that I'm a photographer. But actually, the headline and the pickup is actually the headline. And I'll tell you why. Because mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles is actually the subject line. It's a subject line that's going to be on every single email, potential news article, or Reddit post that someone might want to share. And so without a solid subject line, your content has no chance of spreading. In real life, we make decisions whether or not we're going to interact with someone based on our first impression of them, their appearance or what they look like, how they speak. And online, that attention span is even shorter, where people are deciding whether or not they want to click or ignore. Now, if you create content without thinking about how the content is going to be shareable, well, that's like kind of going to the gym, working out real hard, trying to create good content, and expecting people to flock towards you. But I don't think that's how it really works. I think in the best case scenario, what you want to do is to think about whether or not your title is shareable before the project even starts. And so if we take the mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles as an example, and we strip it down to just a mermaid, well, mermaid all alone actually doesn't give you enough of a foundation to start a cool project. So it doesn't matter how good the photograph actually is. Mermaids, I don't know why, but maybe they're just not inherently something interesting enough to create engagement. 10,000 plastic bottles, well, it's kind of the same thing. That's 10,000 pieces of garbage. No one really wants to see 10,000 pieces of garbage, so no one's going to click on it. It's the unique combination of the two that really creates a whole bunch of different questions that run in your mind. Well, you want to know what it looks like. You want to know why it's being done. You want to know how it was done. Right? It raises a whole bunch of different questions, and that's how you know that it's a solid headline. Now, these headlines are very important because it's what news reporters are going to kind of dress up in order to fit their audience. So this would be kind of for general public. They would put artist places mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles to raise awareness for plastic pollution. Very factual. Now, a photography audience might be far more interested in this title. Photographer suspends camera to capture mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles. And for a sensational conservation crowd, it might look like this: photos of dying mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles. See, at the end of the day, that core headline is actually what will help reporters design all the fluff around in order to make it fit their audience. And if you don't take the time to provide them with a solid headline, well, no one else is. And they're not going to actually take the time to try to figure out what about your project is really shareable. So if we go to the photo now, this is assuming that you made it past the first step. Your headline was interesting enough for someone to click on. Now they stumble across the first photo. This is where the photo actually matters. Because how many of you guys have ever clicked on a website before only to be disappointed in the final content? Clickbait, anyone? Right? That's just super disappointing. You never want your headline to be way better than your content. You want the two to be about the same, right? So in this case, hopefully people found the title interesting enough. They've stumbled on the photo. Hopefully the photo is of a good enough quality. And if I put myself back in that bar and I'm presenting this photo to someone, I try to think to myself, what would that person want to know first and foremost? Because this is how you're going to design your article or your blog post or your press kit, the same idea. Right? The first question that I think comes to my mind is, well, okay, how did you get 10,000 plastic bottles? Please tell me. And so that's the story that I launch into. I tell people that we reached out to a waste management center asking if we could borrow 10,000 plastic bottles. They said yes, delivered it in a 50-foot truck. That's me drowning in them. It's awesome. And then, right after that, we stumbled across the problem of having to clean 10,000 plastic bottles. So we cleaned, delabeled, unscrewed all of these bottles. And we found out that we have 3 different unique colors, the whites, the blues, the greens, and then so we played around with different patterns, trying to figure out what the most exciting patterns were. In order to capture the unique angle that we wanted, we had to suspend the camera on the ceiling using a combination of plywoods and pulleys. And then from there, I talk about, most importantly, all the volunteers that put their time, blood, sweat, and tears into bringing this project to life, because at the end of the day, there was no sponsor. This wasn't a corporate project. This was a project that was powered by volunteers. And hopefully, at that point, I can circle back to my work, and now people have a greater appreciation for the final result. And so that's kind of how I like to structure my projects. But now, you have this opportunity. Remember what I was saying? You have this opportunity to ask people out on a first date, and you don't want to miss out on that opportunity. Otherwise, it just floats away, dissipates, and you lose the opportunity to engage with people, right? So what does a first date look like on the internet? Well, I'm sure you've heard all of these before. Like, comment, subscribe. Subscribe to our newsletter. Please follow me on Facebook, right? So all of these things work a lot better once you've done a pretty good job on the pickup and the intrigue phases. But if you kind of screw those parts up, then it just comes off as lame and desperate. So the first date, just like in real life, really only works if you kind of lock down the first 2 parts. Now, speaking of Facebook, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about platforms really quickly. So we like to think about platforms as something that is a staple of our lives. I mean, we spend hours on Facebook every day, but this isn't something that's fixed. It's something that's constantly moving and shifting and adapting to the times. So I'm sure all of you guys watch video content on Facebook, but did you know that 80 to 85% of people who watch videos on Facebook actually watch them with the sound off? And so what that means is that same piece of content that you're creating, if you want to upload that onto the internet, it doesn't matter how good it is, just the fact that it doesn't have subtitles could mean the difference between the success and the failure of your project. And so keeping up to date with these platforms that you rely on so much to distribute your content is extremely important. And so just like in real life, if you get complacent and you don't follow up with the needs of the person, things can fall apart. Now, I want to play you guys a video really quickly. And so one of the things that I think is really good about Facebook videos these days is you can actually talk over them. So this is one of the reasons why I think Facebook videos are so successful. Because I can actually take this and show it to a friend in a bar, and you can still kind of sort of keep track of both the video and my voice. But just for the sake of it, I'm going to shut up and let you guys enjoy the rest of it. So let's break that video down really quickly. Remember earlier I said that every single piece of content that you create kind of goes through that same cycle, right? So for every single person who didn't stumble across the blog post or the blog post, the photos, or any other piece of content, this thing is brand new for them. And so as a result, you need those same rules of like pickup, intrigue, and first date kind of all apply. And so in this case, there are multiple opportunities for a pickup. There's a description. Now you'll notice that a lot of like big news outlets tend to not put a lot of description on it. That's because as you scroll by, no one's going to actually take the time to read anything too long. They just want to read something really short. So I have a very short, friendly description. Help me save the mermaid, a few emojis, fist bump. It's friendly. It's cool. I also have a thumbnail that's hopefully going to grab people's attention up front and center. And then the content, the headline right there is actually that this ocean is made of 10,000 plastic bottles. I don't need to mention the mermaid. Why? Because we see the mermaid, right? So you custom tailor the content so that it fits the medium. From there, my intrigue actually takes place in the second slide. I don't actually want to talk about the photo shoot too much because I want people to connect not just with the art, but with the cause. And in my case, I want people to know that 10,000 plastic bottles is the average amount of plastic bottles that an American uses in their lifetime. And then last but not least, I bring them on this emotional journey. I explain the whole thing. We've all been there. And then I have the opportunity to invite them out on a first date. This time around, it's please click on my link, take the pledge, do whatever. This is the first date, right? So I'm sort of running out of time, so we're going to stop here, take a look at this formula once again. So far, I've been focusing a lot on the pickup and intrigue segment of the whole thing, because that's really what we need as content creators in order to stand out and be shareable. But I want to talk a little bit about how I ended up where I am today, and that's really all about the relationship, which is the first date, second date, and so on. And the reason is because the pickup and the first dates are really just like one-night stands. You know, you create them, they're fun, they get viral, and then they kind of fade away, and you're left with not very much. If you're trying to create meaning and build relationships, well, that's really going to happen in the other section. And so the good news is, as a content creator, you don't really need to know why you're creating content. You just need to have a really good time doing it in order to slowly figure it out. So in my case, when I first started my relationship with the internet, it actually started with a real-life breakup. My girlfriend at the time had broken up with me, and I needed to find something to do to keep myself busy. And so I thought, hey, why not take a photo every single day for 365 days? And so every day, I strive to create something, push myself creatively, and ended up with a whole series of photos. And along the way, a bunch of people followed me. And they were just really curious to see what I would come up with next on a creative level. So my motivation at the time was just to be creative. Now, once I got bored of this project, I kind of quit midway. I did 100 days. I started pushing myself on a more technical level. I really wanted to challenge myself photographically to see what kind of new effects, what kind of new photos I did. And so we experimented with a variety of different things, from liquid latex pulling off of a face, to flour and dancers being combined together, to dry ice being tossed into a river. And so as a result, the following that I started accumulating were mainly photographers. They wanted to know how this stuff was done. And so along the way, I went from becoming just a guy who was focused on creativity to a guy who was also interested in educating others. And then eventually I reached the point where I decided to quit my day job. I was a mining engineer at the time. And I decided to quit my day job and just travel the world. And I had so much fun doing it, going around the world, creating new photos, that I started really wanting to share my passion of just living life to the fullest with everyone. And so what it all became about was really hoping to inspire people to pursue their dreams. And so those became like my three staples: being creative, being inspiring, and being an educator. And so, you know, these relationships that you build online aren't just about taking from people, right? We look at this very often and we think like, oh, well, it's so much work to put things out there, to teach people, to share, to comment, and keep up with things. But in reality, it's these relationships that empower me to create the projects like these. So this over here was my first viral success. The first time like my name exploded all over the internet, and for like 2 weeks, it was like I was married with the internet. It was wonderful. And then they just disappeared, and I was left with nothing. But most importantly, this project only happened because of the relationships I had built with people. My parents were dragging me on a vacation out to Bali, and I was wondering what there was to do out there, so I posted online. This lady that I had never met before hooked me up with this other dude who I'd never met before, who became a dive master for this shoot. The day after I got my dive license, I had a model who I found on Facebook also fly herself in from Dubai. I had a guy from Singapore fly himself in after I had met him at a workshop. And together, this whole project really came together, all because I had met a whole bunch of people on the internet who gave me the possibility to create these viral hits. And this story actually repeats itself over and over again in a whole bunch of different contexts, from finding access to a rooftop on a 40-story building, to going underwater, 30 meters underwater in Mexico in a cenote. It's actually called an underwater river, to even finding access to the oldest monastic library in the world in Austria, where we put a princess to create a shot that looked like Beauty and the Beast. And so along the way, life got really interesting. Life was beautiful. I was going around. I had this great relationship with all the people on the internet. I had lots of purpose in being creative, in being an educator, and trying to be inspirational. But I started to feel like my work had started to get a little bit stagnant. I really wanted to find a little bit more meaning in what I did. And so that was what I decided to focus on after a few of my adventures. And I didn't really know where to start. And so my real-life girlfriend actually came up with the idea of my next project, which was to go storm chasing in support of climate change. And the idea was that the coming storms could actually be a metaphor for climate change. Now, this project, entirely powered by volunteers, by the internet, as per usual, was a ton of fun. But at the end of the day, it wasn't really a big success online. And I think that there was a combination of problems, from the photographs not actually being fantastical enough to the subject lines not being catchy enough. I'm not too sure. But long story short, it didn't really work out. But I was really excited about the idea of infusing my work with meaning, and so I kept pursuing that path. So the next time I tried to do the project, I tied a model underwater, and this time waited for sharks to swim around to create a shark conservation project up in Fiji. And so this time around, I focused really hard on trying to get the fantasy element right. We bought a shepherd's crook on Amazon, found a wedding dress, slapped the model on, dressed it all up, and took some photos. And this time around, the photos themselves turned out to be a huge success. We got about 2 million views in 24 hours, hit the front page of Reddit 3 times, but unfortunately the message that this was for shark conservation wasn't quite clear. And so in that sense, it was a little bit of a failure. Fortunately, though, we still managed to get about 100,000 petition signatures, which ended up going to be in support of the creation of a shark sanctuary up in Malaysia. So that was pretty cool. And so that leads me to my final story, which is my mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles. And this, in my opinion, was the first time that I had actually managed to combine all of the elements together, from the meaningful to the shareable. And it was all thanks to these relationships that I had built online, all the experiments that I had gone through in order to get to this point. And so there we go, guys. I would like to end on one final thought, and that is that in real life, when we try to go on dates and we're hunting for true love, the ultimate goal is to find someone who can help you bring out the best in each other. And online, when you're hunting for meaning, I think that it's the same. The ultimate goal is to find someone who can help bring out the best in each other. And so now that you guys have the secret to creating shareable, meaningful work, I look forward to seeing what you do. Thank you.